You're listening to Nothing's Off the Table, the podcast where no subject is too taboo to discuss. Now, please welcome your hosts, Andy Barker and Lou Del Pree. Yay. Another Friday. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, Lou.
What's up, man? I wasn't mute this time.
Oh, hey, Elizabeth, I'm coming, Elizabeth.
Right, pay attention. Hey, Andy, before we get to anything, I completely forgot about this because we were busy talking. We have a surprise guest today. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But I had to kill time today waiting for a store to open. So I went to Wally World and I walked around. And did you know they have Frank's Red Hot Goldfish?
I do now. I did not know that.
Did you know that at Wally World, the chefs have carefully crafted everything bagel Pringles?
I did not know.
Did you know that
Is this a new segment?
No, I'm just saying, I was so stunned today that the chef at Wally World has crafted a selection that includes Philly cheesesteak Pringles.
Oh my God.
How did they do it all? Anyway, I just was surprised about that, so I darn near picked up a couple of cans, man. I'm scared to open them, but yeah, everything bagel Pringles and Philly cheesesteak Pringles.
Let's do it live on air.
Oh man, no, please, I'll throw up maybe next week or something, but I can't do. Besides, we have to get to our guest. But before we get to our guest, we have to do our wrap.
We do have to do the wrap.
It's a wrap.
It's all you.
It's all me, right? But of course, it's not ready. No, I paid for it, so you guys didn't have to. I got it ready, right? So Glenn Beck, hour 1 on 27 January 2025. They went through what happened with Colombia over the weekend. You hear about that? They sent the plane back while Trump was golfing, and apparently the president of Colombia said, no, you got to treat people with respect. Don't send them in cuffs. Turn it around, send them back. Then Trump said, all right, okay, hold on. Between holes, you do that, we're shutting it all down, right? And then they took steps to actually do it. And Colombia quickly said, that's all right, we'll send our own plane. But one thing that was lost in the story is the fact that, remember, they are transporting criminals. So, of course, they're going to be cuffed, man. You're not going to put 70 people back to back on a plane. Next up, Jeff Fisher show, same day, 27 January 2025. According to Andres Berger, the World Economic Forum had over 300 women and trans women booked for commercial intimacy. It was another record year.
Jesus.
Backdoor services were the most requested position, and the richer, the more likely to ignore safety protocols. This is all according to Andres Berger, not me, right? Or anyway. But yeah, Jeff went through it all, man. This guy's report, he was interviewed in one of the European magazines. Check it out, right? It's pointed out many times.
Whoa. What was that?
I don't know. That wasn't me, I don't think. I don't think I lost the shelf. No, never mind. I did lose a shelf. That's what that was. Oh man, I'm not gonna be able to sleep till I put that up with my OCD. All right, anyway, last up we had the president. We want to get this over with, man. Anyway, last up we had the president's daily brief with Mike Baker, and that was today, the morning edition. They talked about Senator Menendez from New Jersey finally getting sentenced to 11 years for his corruption charges. And they also discussed how Hezbollah-inspired Palestinian crowds swarmed prisoner exchanges, causing havoc and causing what would have been, a couple of minute process to turn into an hours-long process, which has forced Israel to back off of some of the other exchanges until they get more guarantees that the areas will be more in control. So that was causing a lot of delays and forcing issues with the peace agreements that are going on there with the ceasefires. I'll tell you that President's Daily Brief with Mike Baker is an excellent thing. Again, if I had 15 minutes a day to listen to news, I'd spend it the first 15 listening to the first 10 listening to the beginning of the Steve Day show, and then I'd head right over to the President's Daily Brief because those will give you everything around the world. But that's it, Andy. That's a wrap.
Excellent. Excellent. So, let's talk about our guest.
Yes. So back again, right? Thank goodness we don't get many, but Eric Cavanaugh's returned to us. Producer, um, host, and former member of the Bloor Group for DM Radio. Eric Cavanaugh running a data, what I think the longest running data podcast out there, right?
Longest running show in the world about data. Still for the Bloor Group. Yeah. DM Radio. We talk all about data, what's happening in the world of data, how to use it, what to do with it. Of course, AI has a big appetite for data. So that's the big story these days is AI chomping on your data.
And that's why we wanted you to come on, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to tell us all what is new in the world of AI. I mean, we had this new Chinese large language model drop. Um,
Deep
with
Seek. Yeah.
yeah, DeepSeek
Deep
with
Seek R1.
headlines. Yeah, well, yeah. Tell us all about it.
Well, it's pretty interesting. So DeepSeek rolls out their R1 large language model, and the big news is that they said it only cost $5.5 million to train. So you look at ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude, and they're 50 times as much to train or 20 times. I mean, I could look up the numbers, but this is a fraction of the percentage of the costs of the big guys, and so people are freaking out. Oh, what does this mean? Really, I kind of predicted something like this at the beginning of this year, really end of last year, on another podcast, the Big Bites podcast with Oceans. That's a company doing hyperscale data warehousing so they can ingest trillions of records and analyze them in near real time, which is just crazy. That's in part thanks to these NVMe drives. But what I said is that we are entering a phase of hyper accelerated innovation, and things going to be crazy. You're going to see crazy stuff happening here. But this large language model, I think number one, it's great that it's open source. So OpenAI used to be open source. Now it's not. Now it's closed source. So I think they have to change their name to closed AI. But it is powerful. It's still a language model, so it's not always right.
Right.
It is generative in nature, so it does hallucinate, but not the fun kind, like with mushrooms. It's
Right.
it's confabulating basically because it makes stuff up. It fills in gaps. It doesn't really know what it doesn't know. And so when you get these edge cases, it'll just make stuff up. So in that sense, there are, limitations to its value. But, people mostly freaked out because it apparently costs so little to train. But that's not that surprising. I mean, you're going to see advances in every layer of the stack here. And the big news I would share with your audience is that I think that really, so OpenAI was complaining, oh, they use ChatGPT to train their model, and it's like, well, you used all our data to train yours.
Right.
Like why
That's
are they
true.
the bad guys and you're not, right?
Right. Now, I do have a question. This was brought up that DeepSeek was self-editing when asked questions that would implicate the Chinese Communist Party.
Well,
Um,
so this gets into and Google has done this,
sure.
Facebook has done some of this stuff. I know for sure Google I've actually documented as they did that
Right.
on COVID related issues back as far as 2020. If you went and like did a search for uh patents for CO, you get all sorts of recommendations. The second you put the letter R, all the recommendations go away because they don't want you searching patent for coronavirus. Same thing with the letter V, patent for COVID. You could do patent for CO. You get all kind of recommendations, and then once you hit that R or the V, they go away. Now that was an earlier phase. That wasn't like these large language models that we're seeing today, but same kind of censorship. But yeah, I mean that is pretty clearly. You have to think about these models as layers of functionality.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so these deep learning modules, they have all kinds of layers to them, inference layers, for example, ingest layers, hidden layers, all sorts of different things that process. And the other really important thing to know about them is, they when you train a model, what you're doing is you're adjusting the weights and the balances in the
Yes. Yeah.
parameters. And they have billions of parameters, these things do, right? Which is kind of like the brain. So it's kind of like a brain remembers information. But the thing is, it's not like a traditional database where you save a particular string of text or a number that you then recall, and it's exactly the same. That's not how these things operate, which is kind of freaky and also kind of cool, right? But what I realize is, okay, so that's part of the reason why they're not always perfect. But when you see these sorts of editing, when you see that it can't tell you about Tiananmen Square, for example, the reason for that is because they have a layer in there, which is like an auditing layer. It's like the sort of censorship layer. It's a layer designed to identify if people are asking certain questions and to guide their answers accordingly. So they're, in that sense, they're sort of cheating what you think the system would be by putting in this governance, this guardrail. And you see that with Gemini too. You see it with ChatGPT. You can ask it certain questions like Gemini leading up to the elections here in the States. If you asked it a political question, it would say, "Oh, don't ask me that. Go to Google." And it was the
Right,
same
right, right.
kind of layer. It was like, "Oh, I don't want to, don't, you should go to Google for that. Don't ask me about elections." So it's a governance layer. And even if they're open source, that would be the code that they use to build this thing would be open source. But there are the sort of RAG model, as they call it, retrieval augmented generation, that
Uh-huh.
came out of Facebook or out of Meta. And it was a way to tame the large language model, so that the large language model reflects text back based upon patterns it's seen in other text. So in widely published topics, it'll be pretty good. It'll get a good grip on how to do things, like how a television works or how
Right.
a computer chip works. For stuff like that, it'll be very accurate. Once you get into fringe topics that haven't been that widely published about, that's when it starts to get into trouble. But these RAG models are designed to basically give anchors of truth to the model as it generates its response. And so what you'll see is a workflow where it's like, you first of all, you chunk the data, then it sort of analyzes the data, and it gives you a response based upon your prompt. And as part of that, you can add in another layer, which is in these RAG models, where it says, okay, now look at all this data. So like, actually, this is an interesting point, when you are talking with it and throwing out questions and it seems to remember your context, really what it's doing every time is publishing everything you've typed in this session back to the model to get you a refined answer. So it's not like it really knows what you're talking about and then can adjust accordingly. No, it's every time thinking through everything you've just posted. So if you have it, like 10 comments, it's posting all 10 comments back again when you ask another question to get more context for that one particular question. So a lot of this stuff, it looks to be sentient. It is not sentient.
Right.
for sure. It is just reflecting back
Right.
words based on patterns.
One of the questions that I heard them talk about that I couldn't sort of wrap my head around, maybe you can help me, was going back to the policing that you said is a layer, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the comments was, you know, what you're seeing with deep seek that makes people nervous is of course what you talked about, being cheaper to train. But the other issue is they're saying that's just like the iceberg. You're seeing the iceberg deep seek. It's the AI policing it to be able to edit it in real time. That's the power that we're not seeing. Like what, like, but I guess what you're saying is there's no other AI watching it. That's a built-in layer. That's something they can do.
Yeah, well, you will have. I mean, one of the cooler companies I've come across in this space is called
Yeah.
Vectara. They're here in the States, and I interviewed Amr Al-Wadala, their CTO and co-founder, just a couple weeks ago. And he was the former CTO and co-founder of Cloudera, which was the first big data company to make it big. And then they later merged with Hortonworks, et cetera. But their model, then you're going to see so many companies sitting on top of these models. I mean, just everywhere you look now, there are companies using these foundational models, as they call them, like ChatGPT or Claude or any of these. There are tons of them. There are more and more coming out every day. Small ones, big ones, they're all over the place. But you'll see more and more companies building their tools using these engines as part of their stack, and you use it for the natural language development capability, because you can just slap that on top of any number of things. And one of the things that they do that's very clever, because think about, like, for example, a user manual that's 200 pages long. You can load that 200 pages into one of these engines and then ask it all kind of questions and get the answers just like that. And it'll be right like 99% of the time in a use case like that, because it's citing where in the document it found it. So they solved one of these problems early on. But when you're talking about generally just spinning up text based upon prompts for the engine, that's where it's like an ocean of possibilities that it's going to come back to you. But the layers you talked about are designed to either govern what gets out there, shepherd it somehow, point it in a certain
Yeah.
direction.
Okay.
And there's a lot of that out there, and it's not new to them. It's not new to China, and we should expect it to continue, quite
Sure.
frankly. But the more open the model, the better, typically.
That is insane. I mean, when they dropped that, people did freak out for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's powerful. It's still a new technology, but again, what are you going to use it for? So, one of the
Right.
new really good ones bragged about being 80% accurate. Like, okay, what part of your business can be wrong 20% of the time?
It's true.
Fulfillment, accounting. No, like this stuff has to be correct. So, again, you have to be careful what you use these things for.
Right.
Like the big story out of the gate was the guy from the New York Times who was asking it all these questions, and it told him to leave his wife and he wanted to marry him and all this stuff. And he's like, "Oh, this is sentient." No, it's not. It's just reflecting
Right.
back words based upon your prompts. And it was a misuse of the tool. Basically, that's not what you should be using this thing for.
Right.
But you now
Right.
can use it for research. It's crazy. I was just noticing Stack Overflow, which is this website where people go to learn about bugs in their software or how to do things. Its traffic has crashed because people are using ChatGPT instead, because it's pretty good at that stuff. It's pretty good at knowing basic errors in HTML or basic errors in even COBOL and other languages
Yes.
and things. Like it knows tons and tons of stuff. But the crazy part, in my opinion, is that when I say it knows these things, all it's still doing is predicting the next letter based upon patterns of data that it's seen,
Right. Right.
which is like, oh, how is this even possible? Well, it is. I mean,
Yeah.
I can tell you
I
it
tell
is.
you, I feel like a high school freshman sitting in a college senior level class right now.
Yeah.
I'm lost.
Yeah.
Well, the world is moving so quickly, I think, and that's what you're getting at. I mean, we're seeing technology. I mean, Ray Kurzweil said we were going to encounter the singularity in 2045. He has since written another book saying the singularity is nearer.
Hmm.
you know,
Mm.
so I mean, you're right. These things are happening at lightning speed. Um, and,
Well,
they were talking about security for them and how, it's great that Trump is on this and supporting companies to develop this and opening up energy markets to start getting the power it needs, um, because it's gonna require like, whoever gets there first is gonna be at an insane advantage.
well, I mean, it's very, very interesting. What I would say is that with many of these models, what's happening is the people who built them or are using them are realizing how many things they can figure out. And they're just designed again for pattern recognition, but you can have any number of layers in these models, and they are very deep and very complicated,
Mhm.
and they all do different things. But the old-fashioned models are still extremely valuable. So large language models were designed to take text, convert it into vectors, and then convert it back to text. And they do that because you can crunch numbers and you can't really crunch letters. So a lot of the statistical algorithms that they use in order to identify patterns and map them, because that's what they're really doing, you have to do that in math. So basically, you have to take the text, convert it to math, and then you store it as vectors, and that's literally point and array. So like the word dog, every time it sees dog, it has all sorts of different vectors in the same place. So that's going to be over here pointing roughly this way. Cat will be over here pointing roughly that way, for example. And so when it gets the input, it goes, okay, they reference cat, they reference dog, they reference Detroit, they reference Pittsburgh. I'll write a story about cats and dogs in Detroit and in Pittsburgh. And it'll know the difference between a dog and a hot dog, for example, based on context. But again, and here's another really important point, is that because of how they're designed, converting text into vectors, and that's what they actually persist, is the vectors, and that's in all these weights and balances in the
Yeah.
parameters. So the parameters have little bits of data, but they are, for example, the weight is how much it's associated with something. So how closely should I align this word or this token with that token? That's the weight. And then the bias is, okay, what is the angle on this thing, basically? And again, you're talking billions. I mean, they're talking tens of billions of parameters in some of these models. And that's one reason why they're so unwieldy, and why I think Altman said, whatever, a year ago, oh, the era of large language models is over, because he knew what was coming. He realized that, we're not going to be able to solve this error quotient in any meaningful way. Even like the best RAG model will get you to like 90% or 95%. It's still wrong 5 to 10%
Right.
of the time.
Right.
So what good is that? And this is why most of the use cases now are internally focused, as opposed to externally focused, like to prospects or customers or whatever, someone in the outside world. You just want to be able to show, but it's very useful for the inside world. Think government regulations. You can feed the corpus of every government regulation into this thing and then start asking it all kind of questions about how to do stuff, and it'll tell you. But it's like,
Yeah.
go do this, and that. That's where I get excited, thinking about self-governance, where you could turn this whole system inside out, let citizens register and explain what they're good at, and then they'll do little tasks as needed. Just
Tell
like
us about
with
that.
Uber.
You've told me to start from the beginning, and so just to give everybody, so this is an excellent idea of how to complete work share, and
Mhm.
especially if you look at how the White House is structuring the government workforce right now. With take this deal or get fired,
Oh,
and
right.
if you come back, you may be fired anyway.
Right. Well, it's very, very interesting. And there are lots of course, regulations that have to be understood. But dude, think about this, man. Think about even like the most complex legal scenarios, like filing lawsuits, filing motions, all these things. Really, you got to pay now someone $300 or more an hour to do the more serious stuff, because they're the ones who know that system. Well, one of these models can learn that system in a minute. Like, you can load all the documentation in there and then start asking it, okay, what should I do now? Oh, file a motion to dismiss and be sure to include these facts or something. It'll just tell you. So my point of self-governance is like, now, if you have laws, which we have laws, we have documentation, we have regulation, we have all these things, and we have information about resources, how much money we have, what needs to be done, the declarative side of programming, where you just give it an objective and then the system figures out how to do it. We have all that stuff now. So whatever it is the government is doing, and I'd say you start with something easy like the parks that have to be managed, right? You have to get certified. You understand how to do things. You can do all that training online, and then just register. And when the park opens, okay, well, we need 20 people today. It's just like Uber. People are logging in to see, is the park got any jobs today? Oh, they do. Boom, I'll grab it and I'll go. Well, everything you do is then tracked in the cloud and managed. So if you screw up, you don't get to do it again. If you do a good job, you do get to do it again. And you could do this with just about every last aspect of what the government does today, in part because you have all this explanation now. So someone learning, well, what does the Department of Interior do on these subjects? Look into the system. Oh, you do A, B, C, and D. I can do that. Let's just go do it.
I'm thinking Karen Bass should have had something like that. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, think about, so Trump actually commented on this. Think about what it's like to be FEMA, to come in from some other place where you don't know the lay of the land, you don't know the people, you don't know what the hell happened, you don't know what it was like before or after. There's so much you just don't know. Whereas now you can have people register locally. I will be the local FEMA person. If there's a disaster, they got an app on their phone, the disaster comes in, and then you orchestrate. I'm telling you, man, these engines for running things like Uber. Think of that example of Uber or Instacart or any of these people. When you use the app, there's a whole bunch of logistical stuff behind the scenes that gets it all done for you. And now that can be done, including drones and all kind of stuff. It's just crazy what you can automate and manage remotely these days. So yes, to your point, you could just have local people go and do that work and get paid to do that work. Whatever it was that FEMA was going to do, pass out money, get trees off of yards, whatever it is, have the people do those jobs, and you take that whole middleman out of the equation. And, it just becomes outrageously more efficient. It's the people helping themselves with the money that would have helped them through some other party, which was FEMA.
Interesting.
And see, you can, honest to goodness, you can track all that stuff, how long you were
Yes.
at the job sites, what you
Yes.
did at the job site. It's like
They track it now.
they track it, right? They track it now. That's right. I mean, one of my old guests on the show, a guy named George Matthew, he went on to do a drone company, and now he's a sort of an angel investor. But this is like 7 years ago. He was telling me that the drones in industrial use cases can fly over like a salt mine, for example, and look at the pile of salt that's out there on the road or on in the yard somewhere, and tell you exactly how much salt there is because of the math that it can just calculate looking down and seeing how wide.
Jeez.
Oh, you have this much and it lasts that long. Before, people had to estimate all that crap. They never got it right. I mean,
Yes.
it's just, so this is just an example of how much information we can now capture, process, understand, manage.
Let me give you a small sample. I had an issue with my boiler, or not the boiler, the heater, whatever the HVAC is, right? I had an issue with it. I watched video after video, and I was like, it doesn't make sense. And then I hit Copilot, and and then I said, "Can you make it even easier?" And then I fixed my HVAC. It
Wow.
works perfect.
Wow. There you go.
I
You can,
asked it, yeah, yeah, and one of and the one other thing I asked it, Andy and I are playing a video game in a community, and they were saying you gotta play on the computer. Playing on computer is better than playing on the system. You have more control, more this, more that. I said, I don't know if my computer can play games like that. I have a pretty old computer. So they're telling me all this stuff. I don't know any of it. Finally, I asked Copilot, can I play this game on, and this is what I asked, can I play this game on this computer? It said, give me your model number. I gave it my model number. It said, no, you cannot. Here's a list of things you need and how much they'll cost.
Now,
But like you said, it's very for mechanical stuff,
yes.
mathematical stuff, that falls into, left and right lateral limits, clearly defined limits that doesn't require creativity or, you know, um, thinking on its feet, like you said, where there's a percentage it won't land. It's
Right.
very, very effective.
I mean, it's a huge game changer. Again, you have to be careful about veracity, but then we have to be careful about veracity in the real world anyway. I mean, we certainly don't get accurate news every time we tune into this station or that station. So it's not that we should expect it to be perfect, but they are getting better and better. And what one of the things DeepSeek does is it's portraying itself as a reasoning engine. So it does actually think through problems more so than some of these other ones have. And you'll see a lot more attention on that over time. But a lot of the market stuff came from the fear that, oh, I guess Nvidia's new chips won't be that important. And none of that is true. I mean, the chips are still more powerful, they're still more important. What's good is that DeepSeek threw the gauntlet down to like OpenAI, for example, even by being open source. I mean, OpenAI is closed source now. So they were open source. That's part of the feud between Musk and Altman, is that Musk said it should stay open source, and Altman said it's closed source. I think that's a bit of a dangerous and foolish path to take for OpenAI, because number one, if it's a black box, then you can't audit it, and therefore it's like you can't use it for mortgage loans or healthcare or all kinds of other industries where you need to have some audit trail. So what they're working on now is having the audit trail in the RAG model that I talked about. So the checks and balances on the output side as well as on the input side, because you can have balances anywhere. You can have, like I say, any number of layers in functionality, and that's what they call fine tuning, as opposed to like a RAG model. You just add additional layers that do new things, and there'll be more of that coming. I mean, you're going to see more and more layers added for science, for math, for specific languages. You can do whatever you want with it as long as you have the money to do it, and there's a business model under it. And that's why you saw so much attention paid by Microsoft to OpenAI, to working it into their whole platform. I mean, it's like it's central to their platform going forward now. So it's, to your point, it's extremely powerful, and it's gonna deep six all sorts of old fashioned jobs. I mean, even going to college, like, what do you really need to go to these universities for anymore? It's more the connections and having a good time, I guess.
any job that requires your brain will be the first to go.
Yeah.
Like they say, like doctors, lawyers. I mean, we already have models predicting cancer,
Yeah.
way over the human rate.
Yeah. They're good. And so you're gonna have the key is to learn to use it, right? For whatever job you have, learn to use these things, learn to optimize your own personal workflow and figure out what it can do and what it can't do. It can't really create new stuff. So the other sort of disruptive thing I was gonna say in your show is that in my opinion, intellectual property is pretty much dead. I mean, it was already dead, kind of. But what are you going to do? Everything is in this system now. They've soaked up everything and they can reflect back all kinds of ideas and things that you thought was your IP. There will still be lawyers focused on IP and law, like I mentioned. I think before too long, you'll see civil law handled by AI. If
But
you want, you can go
yeah,
through the human system if you'd like, but you'll be discouraged. I
yeah.
think that,
Well,
you
they had that app. Remember, they had the app. There was an app
you told
that
me about this.
that was doing traffic tickets, and it
Don't
was it
pay
was
again or something, never pay
yeah.
again, something like that?
Yeah, you put in your state, what happened, and it was giving you the legal argument to get out of it, but, it needed more experience, and so it was sitting in courtrooms in traffic court recording, and so
Huh.
every bar association in America sued them out. They had to abandon the project,
Wow.
but it was giving accurate advice, man. They were in the courtrooms testing it. They like,
It
it was
it I'm reminded of, who was it who said this? It's a famous quote, I can look it up, who said, I think a Frenchman, he said, "No army in the world can fight an idea whose time has come." And it's like you can't stop this, man. There's just no way you're gonna stop it. It'll be around you, underneath, around, underneath, left, right, wherever you don't look, it'll be there, and it's gonna just disrupt all these industries. And I
oh,
think
yeah.
people have a harder time lying to the camera than they do to a person. So I think it'll actually be better because also the models can pick up anything. This is the
Oh,
point.
yeah.
They can pick up anything, so you can get
Oh,
them
yeah.
to like almost like lie detector tests you used to look for. They'll be so much better. Again, not perfect, never perfect, but still really, really good, like noticing, eye movements and things and being able like most
Different
people
ticks.
facial ticks or
Yeah.
whatever weird things that people do. Like I know some people every time they blink and look down, they're lying.
Yeah.
It's like you're lying. You think
My
about
my kid.
like a kid, sure, kids, many of them like, whoa, I don't know. Like, okay,
All right.
we know you're lying.
Hey,
Hey, one of
did you know before we move on, did you know Andy sells French rifles?
No. Wait, what?
yeah.
This
Oh, really? Okay, like actual rifles. Oh man.
no, he always says this whenever somebody brings up the French.
Never been fired. It only dropped once.
Oh,
He
right. I
sells
remember.
French rifles.
Yeah, that's a good one. I remember that's an oldie but a goodie.
It's an old
Yes,
one for
yes.
sure. It's a
Milton
highbrow
Berle
joke for sure. What
Milton
one of
Milton
you
Berle stole
mentioned
it.
one of you mentioned Copilot. I don't know what that is.
Well, Copilot is there are various versions of Copilot, but it's now Microsoft's AI, right? Isn't that kind of I
Yeah.
think ChatGPT is underneath it. But
Okay.
basically it's your little helper. It's like your help desk, basically. You just ask it any question, it'll tell you whatever you want.
So I put in the search engine on Explorer. If you ask a question on Explorer and you get all the results, and then you click Copilot, it puts
Mhm.
your question into AI, and then it just kind of like
Oh,
makes it
okay.
easier. Like
Mhm.
for me.
Yeah.
Um, but I only, like you said, I only trust it on very mechanical things. Like there's a manual for this, and I ain't reading it.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
It's very good for that stuff,
Right.
and it'll
Yeah.
be very good for lots and lots of other things, but, Mark Andreessen was out
Yes.
there talking about how he's concerned at the bias being baked into these systems, and you can do it a
Yes.
couple different ways. One, the data you train it on. So whatever you choose to train your model on, that is going to be what determines the weights and the biases and the whole constellation of concepts and words and tokens and so forth is whatever you train it on. And how it's designed will alter performance or how it does certain things, but that data is the foundation. It's just like raising a kid. I tell people, this is my favorite example. You have to be careful what data you give it access to, just like with a small child. If you curse in front of your 2-year-old, you should not be surprised when she curses back, because you put that in her model. I mean,
Yeah.
this is how human beings absorb things. And you know what I was really freaked, I think I told you this, Lewis. What really freaked me out, it's like looking at all this machine learning and deep learning and all these modules. I keep thinking about how I remember things. So it's got me reflecting on human recognition and pattern awareness and so forth. And what really has freaked me out, and this is, I have my death of journalism talk that I've put together. And the next phase is, I call it the war on reality. Because in the media, there have been all these narratives that have come out that turn out to be absolutely bonkers crazy and just dead wrong about very important things. And the one that's killing me lately is cholesterol, because remember this whole movement, oh, low cholesterol diet, egg
Yes.
whites for your breakfast, don't eat the terrible egg yolk. And the whole time I heard that, I was like, you're crazy. Egg yolks, you're gonna tell me egg yolk is bad for you? You know what eats eggs? Alligators. They've been around 75 million years. They're doing just fine. They don't cook them. They don't even get the shell, eat shells and all. So the point is, like, they said, oh, cholesterol is bad. And then remember, they're like, oh, well, there's actually some good cholesterol, is the story that came out
That's
a
right.
couple of years ago.
HDL.
And I'm like, what are they talking about? Well, I saw a guy on TikTok, just an interesting dude recording some fun thing. This is the new media era, which is awesome. And he
Yeah.
was explaining, because my wife, Susanna, has MS. That's an
Mhm.
autoimmune disease where your immune system attacks the myelin sheath in your brain, and that's what causes the disability. Well, this guy said, 90% of your brain is myelin. So it's like almost all myelin is what your brain, and myelin is a protein. And do you know what myelin is made of? Cholesterol, right? So here they're telling you low cholesterol diet. Like, are you trying to make us stupid?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on with this?
Maybe
Because
so.
there was the war on salt, and I get it. You don't want too much salt, but guys, do you know what your whole nervous system runs on? Sodium and potassium.
Yeah.
When you see, like, out in nature, you'll see some of those goats, like, climbing up the mountainside to get to the salt, like, so they can stay alive, so their brain will
Yeah.
keep working. Like, you need the salt from the environment to live. It's a
Yes.
foundational component. CO2, I told you, CO2, you know all about this, how it's a trace gas. People are all freaked out. When I researched it, I, asked the Google machine what
Yes.
percentage of the atmosphere is CO2, and it told me. And then it
Zero
has
point zero zero
Zero point
zero.
zero 0.04%, right? So it's not even a half of a tenth of a percent, right? You got to multiply by 25 to get to
Yeah.
1%.
Yeah.
Okay. We're talking 0.04%. But on Google, when it says people also ask, the number one question when I researched it was, is Earth's atmosphere 90% CO2? Right. And so I'm thinking, how did it come to pass that the majority of people in the English speaking world who use Google think that the atmosphere is 90% CO2? It's because the freaking media goes on and on and on about it all day
Yes.
long, but they never
Yes.
tell you how much it is. They never tell you how much it's there. It's like, it's so
Yes.
misleading. And it's just like, how is this even happening in the age of information? There are these hoaxes being played on society that are absolutely gobsmacking in size and significance. And you're just like, what? How did we get here? Like, what is happening in the world that people are so far off base? And it's hard to say, man. It's hard to say.
Laziness is one for sure.
Yeah.
But
I
Just
think
taking
is
what
it?
you hear and not doing your own research.
But well, yeah, but where would you go? I mean, I guess you could sit around and ask questions and really get into it. But people, I think, tend to be trusting, and so we tend to trust what's told to us. And I think this is the weird inflection point we're at right now, because you look at what just happened in this election, right? And despite all this information, 34 felony counts, all this stuff, that guy Stephen Smith was talking about it the other day, I guess on the Bill Maher show, maybe, and he was
yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
look, despite all that, people still looked and said, you know what? Despite all that, this guy is more normal than that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and it's just like we just don't believe things anymore. The trust in the systems is way down. And it's partly because we've been thrown all this nonsense, and people are finally waking up to it, I think.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
pendulum always swings, and when it goes too far, it'll eventually find its way back. And I think we're finally in that retro swing, if you will. Um,
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
hope so, man. I root for global warming. It's cold up here in
I,
Pennsylvania.
I'm telling you right now, man. Here's what this is. If I run for office, for any office, Mark my words, the first bumper sticker of my campaign will be "Put lead back in paint." Because that's when men were made. When everything went to crap when we started taking lead out of paint in the 50s. If you just I really think you can trace our downfall. And that's why I'm gonna say we need to put lead back in paint. That's when men were men. You
Right?
know?
And sheep were scared.
Look at the football helmets back then. Look at the baseball mitts back then. They were catching line drives and tackling. Put that
Yep.
lead back in. Let's man up.
That's funny. Well, you never know. I mean, look at the whole fluoride debate, right? It was a friend of
Right.
mine was telling me, he goes, "Look, what is it? The pineal gland or something,
Mm.
where it winds up going and it kind of dulls your
Lowering the
senses or
IQ.
something." And what did they say in Syria when Assad's regime fell? One of the stories that came out was, oh, he was putting something in the water to keep the people. Did you hear that?
I don't know.
I didn't
They,
hear
they
that one.
I
there's a
believe it,
story that
but Alex Jones with the gay frogs, they turned out they were dumping like stuff in the water, right?
They're turning
They
the frogs
were.
gay.
They were doing stuff in the water though. I mean, that's why I say, like, you talked about climate change and everything. You can go online right now and see an Air Force general testify before Congress going, yeah, we frequently detonate things in the atmosphere, seeing if we can control the weather. You know? You're like, "Get out of here, man. You want me to drive an electric car like the rest of my life and like have no air conditioning while you detonate crap in the atmosphere telling me, you know, like get out of here, man. Come on."
Mm.
Yeah, it's like there are all of these stories that we just believe because they've been told to us. I mean, here's my question on the whole climate change thing. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that the CO2 is making it a degree or 2 degrees
Yeah.
Fahrenheit warmer. Why is that necessarily a bad thing?
I
I
didn't
mean,
know what there's no study on that. The land
Right.
we would reclaim, there's so much land we would reclaim for farming. But here's what the problem is, right? This is what the conclusion I've come to, right? The climate changes regardless, right? So why aren't we spending money on building infrastructure to move in and up? That would be
right.
what would happen normally, right? So we could facilitate that right now. But the problem is the power is here. And when that erodes, the power's now in Pittsburgh,
Hmm.
and we don't own Pittsburgh, and we don't
Right.
own, that part of Arizona. You know what I mean? So I don't want to build in and up and risk the power shifting, right? Because whoever controls the ports of entry
Hmm.
controls that, right? And right now, under our laws, they couldn't, the Rockefellers couldn't come in and just establish. Too many people to be like, whoa, wait a minute. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like too many people are watching. So I think they're just desperate to push it off
Hmm.
until the last possible moment and leave everyone struggling, right? Because if you don't build that infrastructure, it's not going to be there. But I have a very liberal cousin. I ask him all the time, why aren't we just build? I mean, why can't we do two things at once? Why not build the infrastructure anyway?
Right. Well, I mean, who knows? Mother Nature is incredibly powerful, and I don't care how many GPUs you've got, you cannot understand Mother Nature in totality. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
so vast, it's crazy. I mean, I'll throw something out at you that I think is kind of interesting, right? About the whole CO2 storyline and whether or not it's causing traumatic changes in the atmosphere. I mean, the argument is, well, first it's going to get so warm, we're going to bake, and then people in the West Coast figured out that us in the Northwest or Northeast are like, oh, that sounds great. Let's warm it up around. It's too cold.
right,
So then they said climate change because, oh, it could be bad things. And oh, look at the storms; they're bigger than ever. Like, are they
right, right.
really? Are they bigger than
No,
ever? I mean, we only have what, a couple hundred years of relevant, accurate data, and even that is like, is it really 100 years that we only have? So it's not a whole heck of a lot, is the point. But my argument to you is this: we have a case study of what happens when you dramatically cut down CO2 production all around the world, and it's called post COVID. Because when COVID hit, everyone stopped driving. There were all these shutdowns, and for like 2 months, nobody drove around. Well, I mean, there must have been. I've heard 20% as a number, 15%. You cannot know these things. Okay, first of all, you can't possibly know. So you come up with a formula to reasonably assess, right, that what reduction it was, right? So let's say it was 20%. Well, what happened? in a planet that has an annual cycle, right? Because the sun is going around. I mean, we're going around the sun rather, and it takes this period of time, and that's why you have seasons, and the Earth wobbles and it spins around, all this stuff. But the point is, there are
Yeah.
4 seasons for most people because of the Earth going around the sun, right? That's the whole point. Is that it takes a year for impact to show. Well, what happened a year after, let's say March or April of 2020? Well, Texas froze. And then we just saw snow down in New Orleans and like 11 inches in Pensacola and all this stuff like that. So my argument to you is I think we did change the climate a little bit by cutting down CO2 by 20%, which was a stark change now that it kind of came back. Point being, yeah, we changed it. It's not like we strategically changed it. It's not like we changed it to how we wanted. No, it's just different now. It'll occasionally snow in Florida. So it's like, all right, well, good job, guys. Now we changed the climate, and now we're gonna
Yeah.
bad orange crop because all those orange trees are gonna die.
Yeah. I
That's
would
true.
Oh, go ahead,
And if
Andy.
it didn't,
I was
and
just saying that's true. Yeah, I
if it
agree. Yeah.
didn't change, if that didn't change, then we should stop talking about CO2 because
Yeah.
it was a huge disruption. So if that didn't do anything, then what are we talking about?
No, I agree. I'll say this is one thing I thought you asked, like, why do people just believe everything? And I think we've become, a society that everything moves faster, right? I think we used to say the 30-second sound bite, and now it's like 5 to 7 seconds or something. It's down to people's attention. And what I've noticed is, and this kind of blew my brain, right? The earth isn't flat, but it isn't round either, right? It's oblate. It's a little
Right,
flatter at the poles, because it spins and so it
right,
flattens and
right,
and I just and I we might have talked about this and I was saying, but they tell people it's round because that's good enough.
right.
That's enough. That description's enough, right? But you could say oblate. That's not too big of a word for a kid, and you could explain what that means very early. That's a very easy concept to
Yeah,
explain to a kid,
yeah,
right? But they don't want to. And I go back to they asked, I think it was Walter Williams who wrote the book Basic Economics. And they, why write this book? Well, because there's people on TV throwing out a lot of words that they know you don't know. And they know
right.
they're never going to explain it to you because there's only one place to explain it, in the classroom. He goes, so they throw these words out. You have no idea what's going on. He said, so I just wanted to write about the things people are talking about and what these words mean to everyday people. And I think where we are today is a product of that just enough.
Yeah.
Hey, it's getting hot. It's climate change, man. That's all you need to know. That's
Well,
Yeah,
bad.
knowledge is
well,
power.
there's something to be said for that. You got a comment in the audience here. I saw it through the chat. Says, "Hey, I feel they should make an AI to help with your taxes. That would be an effing awesome." Yes, and they're working on it. And that is actually an excellent use case for a model, not necessarily a large language model, but just an AI model to look at your taxes. Because now, if you're QuickBooks, for example, you've got a category, you've got a data set that shows you all the different venues in the United States, like all the restaurants, gas stations, department stores, all that stuff. There are unique identifiers for all those things. And you can kind of tell if it's someone bought food at a restaurant, well, that would be under food. If you bought light bulbs, okay, we know that's hardware, so that's office supplies or whatever. So the short answer is yes. You should absolutely already have one of these things. It might be like Lewis has said, maybe the accounting lobby is lobbying against it right now to stop it from happening. But that is a fantastic use case for a next gen AI model to where it just looks at all of your records, your general ledger, goes, here it is, boom, review it and go through it and just sign it and you'll be done. I mean, that should absolutely happen and soon.
Eric, I gotta cut you, man. It's time to go. We got to wrap up with our final segment. But let me ask you this before we cut you loose, my friend. Will you please consider this part 1?
Yeah,
Because this
sure.
was an education, my friend.
Yeah.
I'd love to have it more.
I like Candy says, Eric, don't leave when we say goodbye.
That's right. Don't go
Yes.
anywhere. We're going to cut your camera, but stay in our green room. Hey, enjoy all the snacks. The fruit basket just came in today. Go ahead
Nice.
and try the cantaloupe.
Nice.
Yes,
All
it's
right.
amazing. It's amazing.
I love it.
Don't
Really
don't
amazing.
worry
Yeah.
about those green room Nazis from the other show. Just eat
Right,
what's
right.
in there. Don't worry about it.
You can have whatever color M&M you want. I
Nice.
promise.
Yeah, the green ones, right?
Eric, thank you so much.
Yeah,
And like we said, stick around and we'll I need to pick your brain on some stuff. But anyway,
You
it was a pleasure. Thank you so much. And we'll
my
talk to
bet.
you
favorite
soon.
segment, Andy.
Indeed. All right. Well, you know what that means. It means I don't have music yet, but that's okay. I'm gonna do my segment anyway.
That's right.
Luke. You gotta do what you gotta do. All right. Well, it's that time. It's that time for hey Lou, kill your camera for me, would you? Thank you. It's that time for the not the wrap up, but definitely the I ain't buying it segment. So I've got a doozy for you again today. Um, this week, what I've got for you, we are going to talk about. Are you ready for it? It's not just political, but all right, folks, let's talk about something that's not just political, it's psychological. I'm talking about Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah, I know it started as a joke, but let's be real. It's a full blown mental disorder at this point. These people aren't just opposed to Trump's policies, they are obsessed, consumed, and completely unhinged at the very mention of his name. We've all seen it, the meltdowns, the shrieking, the crying in the streets. The people who wake up every day and the first thing they do is check social media, hoping for some bad news about Trump. They're so emotionally invested in hating him that they have no identity beyond it. Their entire worldview is based on Orange Man bad, and without him, they'd have nothing to talk about. It's not normal. It's not even rational. It's an unhealthy cult like obsession. And here's the kicker, these are the same people who claim to be the party of peace, love, and tolerance, the party of therapy, mental wellness, and self care. But tell me what's mentally healthy about screaming at the sky because an election didn't go your way? What's mentally healthy about disowning family members over politics? What's mentally healthy about needing emotional support groups, crisis hotlines, and therapy puppies just because Trump won in 2016? I'm sorry, but that's not normal behavior. That's fragility at a clinical level. And let's talk about the paranoia. These people are so convinced that Trump is an evil dictator that they can't function. They see him in their nightmares. They believe he's lurking in the shadows, ready to end democracy at any second. Some of them even talk about fleeing the country because apparently a billionaire New York real estate developer is their boogeyman. But here's what's really disturbing. When you challenge them on it, they lose their minds. They can't handle opposing views. They can't debate without resorting to name calling. They scream about hate speech while spewing the most vile, unhinged, and violent rhetoric at anyone who disagrees. Their emotions override their logic. Their fear overrides their reason. Their hatred overrides their sanity. And this is the same group of people who claim to be fighting for democracy, for fairness, and for unity? Give me a break. The so called tolerant left has become the most hateful, angry, and intolerant group of people in this country. They can't function unless they're fighting some imaginary war against Trump, his supporters, or anyone who dares to think differently. That's not activism, that's delusion. At the end of the day, this isn't about Trump, it's about control. These people have spent so long convincing themselves that they're the righteous ones that they can't handle the idea that they might be wrong. They'd rather destroy their own mental health than admit that Trump isn't the monster they made him out to be. And that's why I'll say it loud and clear. This idea that behavior is normal? No. That their obsession is healthy? That their hatred is justified? Well, Lou, I ain't buying it.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I love that, man.
I
That's like the
relax.
best clip. I love it, man. I want to switch. You watch the news 3 hours a day for 2 minutes
Man, I can't
of
watch the news
material,
for I can't watch the news for I don't know, 15 minutes
and
a
then pay
week.
for the memberships too. That's what's killing me. No.
Yeah.
We need a sponsor.
Right?
All
Yeah,
right.
that's right.
Hey, well, it's time for our last segment, and then we get out of here. Veterans helping veterans. You got our charity?
Yeah, so I know we mentioned this organization a couple of times in the past, but registration is actually opening up next month for the Wounded Warrior Umpire Academy. And if you're not familiar with what they do, shame on you because you haven't watched on the show enough. But what they really do, is we take veterans in and we teach them how to to be baseball umpires. But the best part is we use baseball as an excuse to get the veterans back together, to give them another sense of camaraderie, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, and a way to reintegrate back into society. So check them out, woundedwarriorua.org. Fantastic organization. It's life-saving. It saved my life. I'm forever grateful, and I will continue to bring them up.
Thank you very much, Andy. And then I'll as you prep the music, I'll close with I again, like I said, I do get all of your email, and we're actually talking about doing an episode where we read some of them, so that you guys can. I have replied to some. I just can't get to all of them, but we are thinking about doing an episode where we read some of the email. But one thing I gotta say is, Marguerite, man, this is a joint account. My wife be seeing this. You can't be putting that stuff in them emails, Marguerite. Don't be writing like that.
Yeah,
All right, but
Marguerite.
anyway, hey, we may be reading some of those emails, except for Marguerite's, but unless we get a paywall or something. But anyway, hey guys, we'll see you next week. Make sure you comment, click like down below. Big episode next week, big interview. Looking forward to it. And
please
that's all I
subscribe.
got. Yeah.
Please subscribe. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
You're listening to Nothing's Off the Table with Andy and Lou, an Admiral Media production podcast. All information at the time of recording is